All right, Clayton Sayfie here with EJ Holland. We're from the Wolverine.com here on Wolverine TV. This is our high school recap show. We were on the road over the weekend checking out some Michigan recruits. EJ was in Arizona. I was in the Detroit area, so we're going to break those down. But first, remember to head over to the Wolverine.com. You can put in the promo code BLUE60. You get 2 months of our premium content for free. You can get all the scoops from the road. We had a scoop from talking to Rivals 100 defensive tackle Raeshawn Benny over the weekend when I was out there to see him at Oak Park against Clarkston. I'll talk about that in a second, but EJ was in and out of the Phoenix area to see Michigan defensive line commit Quinton Somerville and 2022 quarterback target Nico Marchiol go against each other. Saguaro, the home of Quinton Somerville, and then Hamilton, excuse me, the home of Martial. So EJ, how was the trip? And what was it like seeing those guys out there?
Yeah, it was a really quick trip. Obviously, it was a huge game, not only in Arizona, but nationally. The game was on ESPN, and so it was an exciting game. I mean, it was low scoring, 13-7 was the final, but it was a thrilling contest. It's been a couple years since I've seen Somerville. I actually flew out last April, I want to say. So about 2 years since I've seen him. He's an interesting kid in the sense that he was ranked high extremely early on in his recruitment. Some even had him, I believe, as a top 25 national player. So he was like a five-star early on, and then he gradually dropped in the rankings. And big reason for that is because he never grew. He was a really big, intriguing kid early on. When I went out to Saguaro that spring, he played a lot of offensive tackle, and I really didn't know what he was going to be. And so obviously he stayed kind of the same height. He's 6'1", and he didn't grow into that 6'4", 6'5" guy that a lot of people were expecting him to be, and obviously he focused in more at defensive end. And I think that's where he's going to have to play, despite his height. I don't think he necessarily has the frame to slide inside and be a defensive tackle. I also don't think he has the athletic profile to be a linebacker. He did play some guard in this game, but I don't think he'll be an offensive lineman either. So he's just going to have to be a five tech. The things I like about Somerville are he's really well coached. He's at Saguaro, which is home to several, the top high school coaches in the country. Head coach Jason Mons consistently produces D1 factory. They have a lot of guys coming out of Saguaro. There's some NFL guys on that staff. So he's getting really good coaching. He has good hand placement. He uses his hands really well when pass rushing, and his technique's great. He understands the game. There were times where I saw on Twitter some people were kind of judging him for sticking with the quarterback and not going with the pitch man. Like that was by design. So he understands his defense. And he's a really smart kid off the field, one of the best kids in the class. I think he'll be a great culture fit at Michigan, and that could help him exceed expectations. The things I don't like about him, obviously, is height. I know you can point to examples. Some guys have brought up Lamar Woodley or Brandon Graham, and those are anomalies. I mean, they're exceptions to the rule for a reason. And I'm not saying Somerville can't do that. It's difficult, obviously, when you have to go back and try to find examples of that. So I think he can. He's capable of it, but he has an uphill battle in that regard. He also needs to work on his get off, adding strength. There were times when he was pass rushing where if he wasn't, quickly getting around a guy or using his hands, if he got engaged with the offensive tackle, he couldn't really power through him. So I think developing in the strength and conditioning program, obviously he's not going to get any taller, but he could definitely get bigger. So those are my takeaways from Somerville. I mean, if I had to grade him, he would be a 5.7, high three-star, just because I like his ceiling, but I don't like his floor. But again, I think he's a really good culture fit, a really, really good high school player. But there's just so many question marks as far as how he's going to transition But the good thing about Quinton, again, is that he's a good kid and a culture fit, and oftentimes that can outweigh not having the necessary athletic intangibles to be a successful five tech. On the other side of the ball, Nico Marchiol is another interesting kid. I actually saw him last year as well when I made a swing through Colorado and saw Michigan signee Reese Atterbury. Marchiol was Martial was actually in Colorado before he moved to Arizona this offseason. He's a lefty, so he's one of the guys that you have to adjust your offense to a little bit. Things I really like about Nico are he's accurate. It's tough to teach accuracy, and he's a naturally accurate quarterback, especially on short to intermediate routes. He's the type of quarterback that drives a team down the field and just picks apart a defense. He knows how to dissect a defense. Another very high IQ guy. JJ McCarthy went down to Arizona and trained with the same trainer that trains Nico Marchiol full time. So he gets good training in the offseason. Hamilton's a good program, so he's getting, better coaching there as well. And actually Regis Jesuit, where he was in Colorado, is a great program as well. So he's gotten good high school coaching. He's gotten good training. Like I said, he's very accurate. He can pick apart a defense. He's actually a pretty stocky kid. He's only about 6'2", but he's 215. He's built really well, and he can run over guys. He made a lot of plays with his legs. He's not super fast or super quick, but he can be a downhill runner. And there were even a couple times where he got away from Quinton Somerville and made a couple big plays. Things I don't really like about Nico Marchiol, he's not a guy that has a big arm. He's not going to take a lot of downfield shots. He's capable of throwing the deep ball, but it's going to be one of those, lofty touch deep ball passes. He doesn't have the arm strength to really gun it downfield, and that's why you see him really sticking to short to intermediate routes, really being more of a bit of a system guy. But I think that's fine. He can develop more arm strength, and on top of that, he's another guy that I feel like would be a culture fit at Michigan. He's a guy that really respects the program, loves the program, has been on campus a couple of times, understands the tradition and what Michigan means. He also respects JJ McCarthy. And for next cycle for 2022, you're not going to have guys flocking to Michigan that are high level quarterbacks. I think Nico Marchiol would be kind of that guy that would really love Michigan and love to learn from JJ McCarthy. And so I think he would be a safe take at that position.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say is, I saw you write that, and we've kind of discussed this before. We broke down some 2022 quarterbacks a few weeks ago, maybe a month and a half ago at this point. And we were talking about there's some elite guys at the top that you would really like to get. But at the same time, you have a top 35 guy in J.J. McCarthy who, a lot of people are pointing to as that next guy. I mean, or maybe even the first guy. We like what we see from Joe Milton so far at Michigan, but under Jim Harbaugh, that's really going to take the reins of the entire program. So interesting to see him. Glad you were able to get out and see Nico Marchiol. And I know Michigan fans like that coverage. I will talk about the game I was at. I alluded to it earlier with Raeshawn Benny, the Rivals 100 defensive tackle. One of the top targets remaining for Michigan in 2021, probably number 2 right behind Donovan Edwards, 2021 running back out of West Bloomfield. But Oak Park taking on Clarkston. We had been to Oak Park 3 times total so far this year, including Austin Fox going to a game. I went to a game earlier. This was the 3rd. And it was the first time that we actually got to see Raeshawn Benny suit up for Oak Park. He had been out with a slightly torn meniscus for the first 5 weeks of the season, but was pointing to this game as the one that he wanted to return for. Clarkston, of course, has Rocco Spindler and Garrett Dellinger, Notre Dame offensive line commit, LSU offensive line commit, respectively. Both of those guys play on both sides of the football, so he was going up against them all night long. So Raeshawn Benny, Michigan's recruiting him as a defensive tackle. That's where he wants to play in college, and that's where he will play in college if that's what he so chooses because he's good enough to do so. But he played mostly offense. He played full-time on the offensive side of the ball at left tackle, and that's where I was impressed with him the most. Like I mentioned, Spindler and Dellinger play both ways, so he was going up against primarily Dellinger but they moved those guys around, so he was going up against both of them at left tackle. Raeshawn Benny's mean on the field. He's a nice, soft-spoken kid off the field, but first play of the game, he went right after Dellinger. It was a double team, and he drove him way back until the echo of the whistle. Benny's helmet actually fell off, but it was that kind of, and he was kind of talking some trash a little bit after the play. And that really set the tone for the night. He was really good on offense. They wanted to run behind him. Oak Park's an 0-5 team. A lot of that is due to Benny being out, and they had some other injuries throughout the season when I went to see him. But this isn't a great Oak Park team, so Benny was certainly standing out in that respect. He helped their team out now that he was back. He's super athletic. He was the most athletic out of those three linemen, and I actually wrote he was the best lineman on the field, with the disclaimer that he was a little bit out of shape because he'd missed the first 5 weeks. But I actually liked his athleticism at the left tackle spot more than what I saw athleticism-wise out of Rocco Spindler and Garrett Dellinger. But we weren't there to compare them. It was a good measuring stick. However, to look at those guys all in the same game, all in one eye shot, you were able to see all three of those guys playing. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Raeshawn, I approximated he played about 35-40% of the snaps. Again, he was a little out of shape because of missing the first 5 games. And maybe they wanted to ease him back into things. They definitely needed him a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball. Their defense actually flies around and makes some hits and plays pretty good football, even though they kind of have ended up getting blown out every game I've been at. But the defense didn't need him as much. When he was in, though, it was in big situations when maybe a third down or, there's a couple drives where he played every single snap. He flies around on that side as well. It was pretty impressive. He's running sideline to sideline from the defensive tackle spot and making his presence known. Again, I was more impressed with him on offense. On defense, he had a little bit of a rough go at times, but then he flashed at other times. So, again, how much of that is due to the fact that he hasn't played live football in, a year? Probably a decent amount. Probably also a decent amount that he hadn't played yet that season with the conditioning aspect that I've kind of talked about. So a lot of factors went into this, but we finally got to see him live, EJ. I mean, Austin and I had seen him a couple times. We're able to talk to him, but it was good to see him, and it was a perfect game, perfect setting to watch him in because he had some of those elite high school offensive linemen, and they play on the defensive side of the ball too, to compare him with. And then the other guy in my game was Cole Dellinger, the younger brother of Garrett Dellinger, 2023 offensive lineman. Was pretty impressed for a sophomore. Pretty impressive. He played left guard, lining up next to Rocco Spindler, who plays the left tackle position for Clarkston. That's just like that Clarkston offensive and defensive front. He played only offense. Is incredible for high school. I saw them dominate West Bloomfield up front, and West Bloomfield's got all the skill position players in the world, and even some good linemen too. We've talked about them. But Clarkston's at a whole nother level when you have those two big heavies in there. And you add in Cole Dellinger. He was moving guys on the interior. He did a good job. He was technically sound. And I wrote this after the game. It probably helped that he was lining up next to Rocco Spindler, and he's got his brother on the other side of the line, and he's got a really good line, and they're a well-coached team. At the same time, that helps him. At the same time, he's probably learning a ton from those guys. And can see up close and personal what really good offensive line play looks like. So this is going to be a polished kid in a couple of years when we see him. He's already at 6'4", I believe, 260, and projects probably as a tackle. Correct me if I'm wrong there, at the next level, and will probably continue to grow. So the future's bright for him. But a fun night. Clarkston got a blowout win. We had a little bit of rain there. And EJ, then we'll talk about our games this week, but you will be out to see Raeshawn Benny. We have a representative of the Wolverine to see Raeshawn Benny each and every week, but we talked to him afterwards. Sounds like he's aiming for a November 9th decision, but excited to see Raeshawn because you haven't seen him yet this year after you went to see him this summer, though.
Yeah, so I actually have seen Raeshawn in game. I saw people on the board saying, "Well, has anybody even seen Raeshawn play defense?" And well, now you have. I saw him play last year, and against West Bloomfield. And I know Oak Park prefers him as an offensive lineman, but when he was playing along the defensive line, he had just as big of an impact as Justin Rogers, who is a highly rated recruit that signed with Kentucky. I think it's tough to judge Raeshawn. It was tough for you to judge Raeshawn because, like you said, from a conditioning aspect, this is a guy that hasn't practiced or played in a long time because Michigan had the no practice rule for a little while before the season. They didn't think they were going to have a season. He's been injured since they were practicing, since I went to see him 2 months ago. So he's been kind of out of shape. And then you're asking a guy that size who's already up to 275, 280 to play both ways, coming off an injury against a line with three Division I prospects. So he was at a disadvantage there from all those aspects. But I think Rayshawn's a very, very good player. I've said Rayshawn's the most important target left on the board. I think he's going to be just fine this week. I'm really excited to see him against Grosse Pointe South. Now that he has a week under his belt, he can get some conditioning back under him, get the feel for playing in a real football game again. And it's the playoffs, so he's going to, give it 100% out there. So excited to see Rayshawn this week. Other side of the ball, we've seen Will Johnson. Both me and you have five-star 2022 defensive back. Will is questionable for the game. I think he'll tough it out and play. But actually, at that game, you saw him against Stevenson. He suffered a leg injury, so he's still recovering from that. He told me he'd let me know if he's going to play or not. But right now, he is questionable for the game.
Yeah, so if he's able to go, that'll be a good matchup. Yeah, like you mentioned, he got hurt on the first play of the game I was at, battled through it, but I think I said this on our recap show. I was like, Saturday morning when he woke up, that ankle was probably pretty sore. I've sprained my ankle, and it looked like that's what he was dealing with. And if it was a high ankle sprain, then it could have him out for several weeks. But yeah, we'll see if he's able to play. That will be a good matchup. I will be out to see a lesser matchup, but an exciting team that I've seen a couple times this year as well. I feel like every other week I go West Bloomfield, Oak Park, but this is, and I saw them play each other. West Bloomfield against Utica Ford, a 1-5 team going up against 5-1 West Bloomfield. We've mentioned Donovan Edwards a couple times in this video. He is the top recruit on Michigan's board at the running back spot. And you got Dylan Tatum, 2022, Rivals 250 athlete who could play defensive back or running back at the next level. He plays both. He also plays receiver for West Bloomfield. Amir Herring, 2023, offensive lineman with the Michigan offer. 2022 athlete Michael Williams with the Michigan offer, 4-star kid who I've been to 2 of their games this year. He didn't play in either of them. And so, we'll see if he's available for this game. But excited to see those guys again. Raeshawn Benny, we've talked about, he's nearing a decision. Donovan Edwards is enrolling early, so he's just nearing a decision by default. He just whittled his list down to his top 7, so we'll talk to him hopefully after the game. He did decline an interview after a tough loss to Clarkston, but this one should be a nice win. They should be in a good mood after the game, but excited to see those guys as well. And man, that team, West Bloomfield team, is absolutely loaded. So playoffs in the state of Michigan. EJ, excited for some postseason here?
Yeah, super excited. I'll have a high school preview up earlier today. I guess when you're watching this, it'll already be up. But kind of previewing the Michigan targets and commits in the playoffs. So should be a lot of fun over the next several weeks.
Absolutely. We'll have our report next week from the road and coverage in between. So check that out at thewolverine.com. Use the promo code BLUE60 for 60 days of that premium content for free. And we'll see you next time here on the Wolverine TV.